A major Supreme Court ruling today just gutted a key part of the Voting Rights Act. In a 6-3 decision, the court threw out Louisiana's congressional map, calling it unconstitutional racial gerrymandering, saying that race cannot be the dominant factor in redistricting, even when the goal is fair minority representation. The ruling does not eliminate Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, but it significantly limits how it can be used to challenge vote dilution. It means that states nationwide now face massive hurdles in creating districts that reflect minority voting power. It is a huge win for Republicans, with potential consequences for the upcoming midterms, paving the way for GOP-led redistricting efforts. Joining us to discuss all of this is Assistant Professor of Law at Seattle University, Erin Carr. Erin, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Hi, Joyce.
So in simple terms, lay it out for us. What does the Supreme Court decision mean?
Well, the court revisited its long-settled legal precedent with respect to the Voting Rights Act. And in doing so, it concluded that the state of Louisiana had violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment when it created a majority-minority electoral district to provide adequate political representation to the state's underrepresented non-white voters. The court today adopted a similar reasoning to its earlier decision in Shelby County v. Holder, when the court invalidated another key provision of the Voting Rights Act. And similar to that decision, the court today concluded that despite factual evidence and a strong record to the contrary, that, quote, vast social change no longer justifies relying on race-conscious remedies to protect voting rights.
So walk us through the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is still intact, but why experts say the ruling makes it much, much harder to use.
Well, today's opinion represents the final death knell in the Voting Rights Act, considered one of the most effective and consequential pieces of civil rights legislation passed in our country's history. The court's ruling today essentially eliminates the last remaining meaningful enforcement mechanism of the Voting Rights Act. And although the court declined to formally invalidate Section 2, the standard that it adopted renders the Voting Rights Act ineffectual and incapable of protecting minority voting rights as Congress intended when it enacted the landmark civil rights law. After today's decision, it's no longer sufficient for a challenger of a racially gerrymandered electoral district to show that the effect is discriminatory. Now, voters have to provide evidence of intentional racial discrimination, which will make it exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, for minority communities to successfully challenge redistricting maps that dilute their political representation.
So beyond Louisiana, how might this play out nationwide, especially with the midterms looming and other states' maps, particularly in the South, Southeast, in play?
Well, this decision will have an effect on nationwide elections, but it may take months and possibly years for the extent of its impact to be fully known. Today's ruling will further amplify the redistricting frenzy already underway across the country as a result of an earlier 2019 Supreme Court decision, and it will certainly incentivize states to openly engage in new forms of legalized gerrymandering. Today's court decision will also dramatically reduce minority representation in Congress, placing well over 100 Black and Hispanic districts at risk of being eliminated. And additionally, by some estimates, today's decision could allow Republicans to secure 19 House seats and retain control of Congress in this year's midterm elections.
Just for context, on a personal level, my parents, I was a baby when the Civil Rights Act was passed. So it hasn't been that long, within the last 65 years. So for communities of color, How does this fit into the Supreme Court's pattern that we've seen of just narrowing the Voting Rights Act in general, and how does it impact decades of civil rights advancements?
I'm really glad that you asked that question because I think context is important. Today's decision, it's not a tweak, it's not a jurisprudential anomaly for this court. The Roberts Court has been uniquely hostile to voting rights and more broadly to civil rights for historically disenfranchised communities. This decision is the culmination of a multi-decade project by conservative members of the court, led by Chief Justice John Roberts, to eliminate the Voting Rights Act. And it largely accomplished that goal today. And so I think we need to view today's decision as part of an ongoing doctrinal shift by the court to systematically weaken constitutional and statutory protections for minorities in virtually every area of the law.
Going to have to leave it there, Erin, but we'll talk much more about this in the months and years ahead, it sounds like. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Joyce.